Welcome to the Best You 2022 Virtual Women's Summit. My name is Marnie Swedberg. I'm a missions ministry mentor and the host of this summit. So excited to welcome you. Be sure to download your summit schedule so that you can catch the live programs today, as well as go back and check out the session pages, and you can catch the replays anytime. Also, you are invited to request free swag gifts. You'll be able to identify the 13 new summer gifts by using the new tab that's up at the corner there. Or you can also go and capture any of the other 60 gifts from previous summits, all at the homepage at bestu2022.com. Take a moment and invite a friend. We are live right now on YouTube, and you'll be able to interact with the session leaders as you go. Right now, it's my joy and privilege to introduce you to Nancy E. Head, the presenter of this program called Prep for Discomfort Zones. Nancy is the author of Restoring the Shattered, and she was a single mother of 5 for 11 years. Nancy now teaches, writes, and speaks about God's providence and grace. During this session, she's going to share with you how you can survive these unprecedented times of uncertainty, how you can find peace in God's Word, God's workings, and God's ways. Buckle up and prepare for the coming unknown as Nancy takes us right now into Prep for Discomfort Zones. Welcome to you, Nancy Head.
Thanks again to Marnie for this opportunity. Thank you for tuning in. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are and whenever you're watching. And we're going to try again on that. There we go with the slides. Push the wrong button and the wrong thing happens. Learned that in radio when I was back then. Okay, discomfort, prep for discomfort zones, and we all have them. And they come to everyone. They draw us closer to God, and people walk with us. It's our obligation to walk with others who are struggling, and eventually we can work to build communities to lift others through this, for whatever their challenges are. And here's a picture of what I thought was a coming storm. And my husband said, well, that's an optimistic picture. The storm is passing. He's a meteorologist. He knows these things. So, yet those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not become weary. It's from Isaiah 40:34 and the NASB version. We all have discomfort zones. Sometimes it's a difficult passage in life. Sometimes it's a hard thing we have to do at work, something that pulls us out, a mountain climb if we don't enjoy that, a metaphorical mountain climb even. So we need to, as Marnie said, buckle up and get ready for the storm. But this too shall pass. And we can look in the Bible to see some famous people who have had their own storms. And what comes to mind for me is the shepherd Moses, that who was the prince of Egypt and ended up for 40 years shepherding on Mount Sinai. And not what he chose in life, but what he ended up with, the discomfort zone. And we think in our lives that it's never going to be the same. You get comfortable in this, and I think Moses did. And then he had the big burning bush experience. He ran into God. He encountered God. And he'd probably become in 40 years comfortable shepherding sheep, thinking this is it. And then the bush caught on fire and it didn't burn. He went over to see what it was. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the burning bush, "Moses, Moses." And Moses said, "Here I am." Now we think, oh, Moses saying, "Hey, I'm present." But that's not what he's saying. He's saying, "I'm ready." God continues to speak. "Do not come any closer," God said. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Then he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Moses thinks he's alone, but he's not. God is with him. God says to take off his shoes. He's standing on holy ground. I've actually done that at church sometimes during worship music. Take off my shoes. I feel like I'm claiming this holy ground, this little piece of holy ground that I'm standing on. I sit in the back. Nobody seems to notice. So this conversation continues. God says, "You're going to go to Egypt and free my people." Now remember, this is Moses. And Moses says, "Here I am." And then God says, "You're going to go and free my people." And Moses says, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." Now, I saw something that, we've read this story how many times in our lives, and I saw something I've never seen before. Isn't it funny how we notice this? When you've brought the people out of Egypt, you're going to stand on this mountain again. Moses is standing on Mount Sinai. He's going to come back to Mount Sinai. And if we recall correctly, that's where he's going to get the 10 Commandments. And then he's going to ask God, "I want to see you." So at the beginning, he's hiding his face. And he goes through this trial. And isn't it kind of funny that after you've done the thing I've asked you to do, I'm going to give you a sign that it's really me? God has a sense of humor. Think of all the signs that Moses is going to get. All of the plagues of Egypt that God has sent. God will say to Moses, "I'm going to send this plague." And then he sends it. "I'm going to send this plague." And then he sends it. But at the end, "I'm going to give you this sign. You're going to worship me on this mountain," the same mountain you're standing on now. Moses said to God, "Well, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you.' And they ask, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" And God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. 'I am has sent me to you.'" Now, think about that. Think about that I am who I am. I am who I am. I am who I am because God has always been God, is God now, and always will. He does not change. And that is the assurance to Moses that he's going to be with God and that God is God. And so we have friends. Moses really needed some friends at this point throughout. And he says to God, "I don't speak well. Can you give me somebody?" And, you go through childhood Sunday school classes and you see all of the explanations of this. And you kind of think Moses is not trusting God very well. God said go, and he should have just said, okay. That's what we think. But, it sounds like God had this plan in his pocket all along that he's going to send Aaron too. And we see this in the scripture when there's a great battle after they've escaped from Egypt. There's a great battle. And Moses' hands were heavy. So they took a stone and they put it under him and he sat on it. Notice the support that he's getting. Aaron, his brother, who's speaking for him when he's in Egypt, is also there. And Hur supported his hands. As long as he held his hands up, the battle went Israel's way. And when he would get tired and his hands would fall, the enemies would prevail. So these friends come and support him. We need friends. We need friends to support us. Girls got to have friends. It really matters. It makes a difference because two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another one to lift him up. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. It really matters that we have support. When I was a single mother, I had 2 best friends. I call each of them my best friend. One was good for giving advice, and another one was very good for listening and then giving good advice. And the thing about these friendships is that you get support from your best friend. And then the time will come when you give the support to your best friend. It's never a one-way street. Friends help each other. And then we have the larger community. And you'll see my best friend, our man's best friend, sitting right there. Looks like a family gathering, but perhaps it's a neighborhood gathering. And of course, inviting our best animal friends is wonderful to do. The larger group of friends. So Moses was on the mountain by himself, he thought, facing a God he was afraid of, so that he had to hide his face. Then he's got friends, Aaron and Hur, supporting him, holding him up. And when I was a single mother, this was the best. And honestly, it still is today. The same friends. Just because I'm not a single mother anymore, my kids are grown up, I'm remarried, doesn't mean that there's not a need for support sometimes. Things don't, there are still the frustrations of life. There are still the storms. There are still the discomfort moments. There's an individual one-on-one ministry. We saw that with the cups of tea, just sitting down listening to somebody. One time I came home, my neighbor was upset. I don't remember why. And I said, why don't you come in and have a cup of tea? And she sat at my dining room table and we just talked about whatever the problem was. And later on, it's like, that was the best cup of tea. That was so great. And sometimes we need a larger group. Remember that Jesus and his disciples, he had 3 great friends, Peter, James, and John. And sometimes Peter, James, and John were the only one, for example, the Transfiguration. Jesus takes them up on the mountain and they have this beautiful mountain experience, this beautiful worship experience. And the other 9 guys and the apostles didn't have that experience. But we need a small group of trusted friends that we can talk to, that we can hear. And we need the larger group around us. For a lot of us, that's the larger congregation at church, or it's the Sunday school class. It could be some coworkers at work. But we need that larger community. And Jesus modeled this for us. And then, of course, Jesus had the crowds. And again, the congregation at church, because that lets us, once we get through our mountains, that lets us take what we've gotten through that storm and we find someone who is walking through their own new storm and we walk with them. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 says, "Blessed be the God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we will be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. So when Moses gets called from the burning bush to Egypt to go home to Papa, who maybe has been looking for him because he murdered an Egyptian. And the brother is there, the stepbrother, kind of, is there, who's going to be the next king, or already is the next king. And maybe his welcome isn't so friendly. And we're going to lose our whole labor force here. So he goes through this individual and with the smaller group, and now he's dealing with the larger group of all the Israelites. And we know how that goes, where they complain a lot. They complain, where's the water? Where's the food? We should go back to Egypt. This is terrible. What have you done to us? And he ends up dealing with all of that, but he's also come out of his discomfort zone with them in the discomfort zone of the wilderness, and that eventually leads them to the promised land, although he can't get in himself. He goes to his own promised land. Blessed be God, God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in our affliction. And sometimes we ask God, why? He comforts us in all our affliction so that we will be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort we've received from God. So anytime that you're really going through that very big struggle, you need to remember that God is comforting us, because someday we're going to get to comfort someone else. And there we are. So I started out as a single mother who couldn't sleep at night because I was alone. And for a while, and again, this is at the beginning of all the problems, nobody else even knows that I'm going through this. And the best part began when I began to tell other people what my struggle was. And they began to mentor me. And I began to grow strength in my ability to handle this situation with God's help and with the support of others who told me it wasn't all my fault, who told me they were with me, and who told me that God was walking with me through this. And it was years of struggle and years of various kinds of struggle. And if you've ever been divorced and you've had the contention that goes with that, and the problems with managing two kids living in two different households and all that goes with that. And then you get that smaller community around you, and they sip tea with you, and they tell stories with you. And they even say, I have this problem. Can you pray for me? And here's what it is. What do you think? And as you carry someone else's burden, it actually lightens the load of your own. And this happened one time when I was having a really difficult time. And I called my brother and I said, I'm having a really difficult time. And my brother said, well, your nephew is down in college. He's having a really difficult time, and it's his birthday. Tomorrow's his birthday. Can you go get him and maybe bake him a cake and spend his birthday with him? So I drove down 45 minutes away to State College, picked up my nephew from the college, University Park, Penn State, and brought him to my house, and he visited with my kids. And I baked him a yellow cake with chocolate icing, and we lifted each other up in our difficult time. So that's very important. The larger group of friends. When I was a single mother and things were hard, the Sunday school class one year gave us Thanksgiving dinner. Gave me a laundry basket with a turkey and gravy, a can of gravy. I use canned gravy too much, but I said thank you. Potatoes, canned vegetables, and a few other things that were thrown in there. I was really grateful for the laundry basket. needed a laundry basket. When you're a single mother and resources are tight, laundry basket even is a little bit of a luxury to have. So there's the individual ministry, the group ministry, and the ministry that you have to the community. So it seemed to me that there were so many things that we could do. Went down to the local food bank and asked the man, what can we do? And this is a surly, retired, sometimes surly, a pretense of surly, retired Marine colonel. And he told me a story that has stayed with me all these years. And again, he's part of this group ministry, but he does this one-on-one ministry. He sees a woman, a teenager still, with 3 children. Wow. And you're assuming what I always assumed when I heard this, what I first assumed when I heard this story. Teenage mother, 3 kids, and triplets, come on. No, she was married. She was married and 3 kids, a husband. The husband didn't have his high school diploma. He needed his GED in order to gain regular employment. The Marine colonel walked this man through the GED process. He lifted this family out of poverty, and they don't come back to the food pantry anymore. And so many times we look at the teenage mother, 3 kids, and we judge and we walk away instead of wondering what's really going on. Now, had she really been a teenage mother with 3 kids, not married, we still should help her because we can still lift her up. We can encourage her to go back to school. We can encourage her to live her life in a way that honors God and that leads to the kind of support and independence. And that's what I really saw with my friends assisting me in going through. They helped me get through college, 4 years with all those kids, so that I could get more gainful employment and so I could be more independent. So because I had a house, and back then in Pennsylvania, if you had a house, if you got welfare cash, you had to they put a lien on your house, and eventually you had to pay it back. Well, I didn't want any more debt on my house, so I never took welfare dollars. I could get food stamps sometimes, but that was sketchy. Sometimes you get them and then things happen and you're not eligible anymore. So instead of just giving me food, just giving me that Thanksgiving dinner, there was a time when employees from the telephone company gave us Christmas presents, everything. You can just keep doing that for people, or you can encourage them in ways that lift them up. Me going through to college, the family at the food pantry, that man getting his GED. Once he got his GED, the Marine colonel retired, called some of the prospective employers and said, "Hey, I know that you've been employing this man part-time. He's got his GED now. Can't you put him on full-time?" And again, that's their success story. So when you drive past the homeless guy, and sometimes I wind the window down and I hand out a McDonald's gift card, fast food, can't buy booze with it. It's hard to buy drugs with a $10 McDonald's card. And it's a one-on-one. Maybe you could put a little card there about your church and hand it to them. They usually look confused because people either ignore them or give them a little cash. And this is the way they can buy food. How can you help the homeless with just that? Well, first of all, they get to eat. Secondly, if it's really hot out or really cold out, they can go sit in the McDonald's for a little while. They have access to the restroom. They can get cleaned up. They can make themselves more presentable. It takes somebody 3 days on the street until they're unemployable. By then, they smell too bad. So giving the homeless socks, it's the primary item that they need, personal hygiene items, and food helps them. It doesn't enable them just to keep doing what they're doing. Who wants to live on the street? Who wants to be out there when it's 80 something degrees and 90 something degrees or 19 degrees? My husband and I got a phone call one day from an aide in one of the state reps' office, the state legislator, who's my best friend. And she called and she said, hey, there's this couple here. They spent the night outside last night. It was 19. It was only November. It was 19 out. If you pay a night or two in a hotel, we'll pay a night or two in a hotel. And then that'll give me time, she said, to find them other accommodations. And that worked. They got in and they had help. They were in and out of homeless situations. Eventually, we lost track of them. People don't need a crane. They just need a hand up. Another story is a friend of mine who had a storefront pro-life office on a busy street. And she could walk from her house, she'd walk through her backyard across the alley and come into this office every day. And if someone came into the office, she would explain the issues about abortion and euthanasia, infanticide, and just offer information. And one day this couple walked in and they weren't looking for information. They had come to the city and they had used up all their resources to get there, because a job had been promised. But when they got there, they realized the job had fallen through. And now they have nothing and they have no job. So she went up to her house and she got some pots and pans, some washcloths and towels and soap. And she came back and gave them some food. And she had things set up there so that, it was a minimal bathroom and kitchenette with a little, microwave so that they could stay there. She didn't even have to invite them into her home. She had this way to help them. They needed an address, which of course is not a storefront office, in order to be able to apply for benefits. She paid their first month's rent and last month's rent, got them an apartment, helped them move in, got them what they needed as far as the minimum amount of furniture. It's always easy to do at used furniture places. And within a couple of weeks, the guy found a job. And they became independent. And that was the whole idea of people helping me become independent and people not looking down on me because I was dependent. And that brings up a couple of interesting situations. One was when I was a bank employee when I was working my way through college. And I learned very early on in banking career that banking really wasn't for me. I'm not a friend of numbers. No, they just bore me. So I got a degree in a different field and hung in there, but I was a bank employee on food stamps. And so one day I went into one of the local branches and asked for my food stamps. And I had not worked in this office and no one knew who I was. And I had one of my kids with me. And when I got to the counter and I said what I wanted, the woman behind the counter became obnoxious. And she was actually rude. And I was going to say something about, you don't know my situation. And by the way, I'm one of your coworkers. I work at a different branch. But I looked at my son and I realized he's not noticing. He's thinking about his video game or whatever it was that he was thinking about that day. And I got my food stamps and I left. And on another situation, probably a year or two later, my youngest son, for the very first time, was about to be allowed. I was going to allow him to go into the grocery store, which I'd allowed his siblings to do. I give them a few dollars, go into the grocery store and buy something, bring it back out, hurry up. We're all sitting here in the car waiting for you. And this was his turn. He was the baby, and this was finally his chance to do what his big brothers and sisters had done. I didn't have any money, but I had $1 in food stamps. And he was supposed to bring in, this is funny today, the price of things. He was supposed to bring a snack for the school party the next day. And you could buy a bag of chips with $1 back then. So I gave him $1 in food stamps, and he went in and picked up cheese puffs. And he's going through the checkout counter, and I saw the same look on the checkout clerk's face that I had seen in the bank teller. I'm, of course, parked next to the window where I can see the checkout line, so I can keep an eye on my baby. And I'm watching him, and I'm seeing this look, and I almost parked the car and got out and went in and told this guy, you don't know this kid's situation. Sorry that his teacher didn't assign him to bring fresh vegetables to the party. This is a kid buying junk food with food stamps. But notice the assumptions it seemed to be that the clerk was making. And I realized that my kids hadn't noticed, but had we remained in that situation for a long time, they would have looked up and they would have seen the look of disdain on the face of the bank teller or the store clerk. And maybe something in them would have broken. We wonder, how do people end up on welfare for generations? And actually, the percentage of people who end up on welfare for generations is very low. People come on and off welfare frequently, much more frequently. It's not even close. It's something like 12% who stay on it forever. But many of us have the stereotype view of somebody who's standing in the street and begging, somebody who's standing using the now you don't have to go to the bank to get your food stamps. Now you use the access card at the grocery store. We make these assumptions about these people. They're leeches, and these are people who are going through a storm, and maybe they don't have anybody to walk with them. And we need to walk with them. There was a girl on the street one time, very busy street in our city, and she was sitting there with the sign, help. I don't remember what her sign said. Pretty girl. Looked to me maybe 16, 18. Was she kicked out of her house? What we don't realize many times is that some of these families who are on welfare long-term, when their children reach 18, they lose their housing. So this girl's out on the street, and I don't know why. And I thought I'd help her. I pulled over, wound the window down this far, handed a gift card out, and drove away, thinking I helped her. She can go get something to eat. She can get warm because it was cold. And then I realized later on that I didn't really help her that much. I could have gotten out of the car and asked her how she ended up there. And I could have said, is there anything I can do? And I could have maybe referred her to someone, called my friend in the state rep's office and said, hey, what can we do? Remember we helped, maybe that hadn't happened yet, but hey, is there anything we can do for this girl? But I didn't do it. And I always felt like, I wonder what happened to her. Never saw her again. Didn't try, I didn't get a second chance at that. So we see people all around us. Sometimes we're the ones who are going through the storm, and sometimes it's somebody else. There are plenty of ways to help. First of all, do you know who your neighbors are? So we have neighbors, and sometimes we help them out a little bit. We at least try to encourage them. And we have helped them out. So they're close to us. We don't really know all of their situation, but we know enough to know that sometimes they need some help or at least some encouragement. So the first step might be to get to know your neighbors a little bit. And then secondly, get to know your community. Because one of the things my husband and I found out while we were making this effort to help people in our community is that there are several food ministries, very few homeless shelters. And so that when it is 19 degrees, for a lot of people, there really isn't any place to go. And imagine, next time it's 19 degrees, take your camping equipment out in your backyard and see how long you last. And maybe you enjoy that. Maybe you also have the clothing that would protect you for that. But a lot of people don't have a tent and the 20 below sleeping bag. So our community, getting to know our community as well. And that's been a huge blessing to us. We're helping out with a food ministry. It was Good Friday, I think. And Easter coming, and we were passing out Easter dinners. And a large group of people, maybe 20 or 30 people, volunteered. And people were inside preparing ham and potatoes and corn and putting them into the styrofoam dishes with the little slots so that the liquid from the corn doesn't get into the potatoes and mess up the ham. And so we're packing, cutting the ham, and people are packing the food. And then people are outside handing these dishes out through car windows. And we thought that we would have maybe 200. And fortunately, we had a lot of ham, and we kept cutting and we kept preparing, and they kept passing out food. And eventually we passed out more than 700 meals that day. So because of COVID, because of the economics of today, with prices increasing the way they are, there are so many more hungry people. And because of COVID, there was the moratorium on rent and things, but there are homeless people today, and we will run into them all the time. Jesus calls us to bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. And as I said earlier, when you carry someone else's burden, it lightens your own. And when you help carry someone else's burden, you lighten their load for them. There are a lot of people who are hurting, and they don't have to be homeless on the street. They don't have to be destitute using the access card. There are a lot of people hurting. And if we can make ourselves accessible to them, if we can make ourselves open to them, and sometimes that means we tell them our own story of our own difficulty, and sometimes it means we sit with that cup of tea and listen. So that is Galatians 6:2. When we read further to Galatians 6:10. So then, while we have opportunity, let's do good to all people, and especially those who are of the household of our faith. So do good to all people. It's a mantra that we can carry in our hearts, is coming from Christ through Paul in Galatians. Individual ministry, small group ministry, 2 or 3 friends, for where 2 or 3 are gathered together, he's there if they're gathered in his name. And community ministry. I wrote Restoring the Shattered because people had treated me like I was a broken piece of glass, not that needed to be thrown away, but that needed to be restored back. And think of a stained glass window that paints a picture. And the stained glass of the church has some missing pieces and some cracked pieces. But the thing about glass is you can always recycle it. It doesn't degrade. You think of so many things in the world that diminish in their quality, but not glass. You can always melt it down and turn it into something else. And the colors in the stained glass windows aren't sprayed on. They don't scrape off. The colors are the essence of what we are. And there were people when I cracked who helped me put my pieces back together. And I have this story now to tell. And it leads me to feel like there are so many pieces of cracked glass around me that I want to help other people come be a part of the picture. So what is the picture? The picture is the picture of Christ and the church. And the church is the bride, and we need her to be complete in her pieces. And the beauty of the stained glass metaphor I'm using, if you have stained glass at your window, in your church windows, as your church windows, it's what lets light into the church. So we, the church, are the picture of light, the picture of Christ to the world. We need all our pieces to be in place. I want to thank you for coming today. Thank you for being here. There's a question and answer. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions. Seeing none.
Thank you so much. What joy. In just a second, we're going to have a Q&A session here with the speaker. But I want to remind you to take a moment and invite a friend. We are live right now on YouTube, and there's just a lot of encouraging stuff here. Plus, even if it's toward the end, you just want her to be able to go back with you and catch any of the sessions that you missed and look forward to those that are still coming. Also, don't forget to grab your free swag gifts. So much great stuff. We're so excited that you've chosen to join us for the Best You 2022 Virtual Summit. My name is Marnie Swedberg, and I am a missions ministry mentor. You can learn more about that as well at the top bar at Best You 2022. And right now, it's time for us to have Q&A.
There we are, back again. So I do want to thank Marnie again. Get my comments up here. Marnie says she just loves how God uses individuals to be his hands and feet to others. Thank you very much, Marnie, for the comment. And I just want to thank anybody for being here. I apologize for the beginning when we had the little disaster going, but this is what live radio is. It's what live streaming is, and it's what comedy is too, if you feel like I Love Lucy. So I think we ended better than we began, and it'll be a story to laugh about eventually. So thanks to Marnie again. I want to thank Jesus Christ and the church and God the Father for the burning bush, for the message that the God that we fear and we hide our face from is the God that eventually brings us back to the mountain and shows us his being to the point where we can share his glory, the Shekinah glory that Moses had. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your patience as we had our divine comedy here. God bless.